Good evening, everybody. We will be getting started. Just to remind everybody that Liam MacArthur, who is of course representing the Scottish Liberal Democrats, is running late as he was in position as presiding officer, deputy presiding officer for Parliament today when the vote was taking place, and he's dealing with business, but he has told us he will arrive. But I am sure that we've got a lot of questions to get through, and we do want to make sure we make the maximum use of time, so we will just be getting started. So good evening, everybody. My name is Talit Yacoub. I'm a campaigner and consultant, and I have the privilege of being your chair today. Thank you to all the organisations involved for the kind invitation to do so. Welcome to everybody in the room and the over 500 people joining us online, showing the strength of feeling and care for the issues that we will be discussing today. Thank you to the organisation behind today's hustings, RC's Coalition, Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, Scottish Environment Link, the Scottish Food Coalition and the Scottish Rewilding Alliance. Between them, they represent hundreds of organisations and over 1 million people in Scotland. The purpose of events like tonight are to hear from our potential future MSPs and to ensure that candidates seeking election are aware of the issues of importance to organisations, but crucially, issues of importance to the general public. The 2025 Scottish Climate Survey found that 72% of respondents felt climate change is an immediate and urgent problem, with 4 in 10 stating they were having to cut back spending on food and other essentials to spend more on energy bills. A surveyation poll conducted in early 2023 found that 63% of people thought that scallop dredging and bottom trawling should not be allowed to continue inside marine protected areas. These are issues that voters care about, and we need candidates to care about them too. These hustings, as I said, are an opportunity to hear from candidates on these issues and more, and to ask questions about what they will do to protect climate and nature. But in a time of increasing disinformation, division, and increasing public distrust in institutions, I firmly request all candidates to respond with accuracy, integrity, and honesty to the audience. And I make a request to the audience to ensure your questions are short and specific, to give maximum time to scrutinise. If you start with, "This is more of a comment than a question," I will remove the microphone from you. The purpose of the meeting is not for me, the chair, or this meeting to decide which candidate holds the most appropriate views on the relevant topic, but for those in the audience and beyond to assess the quality of answers given and decide for themselves. Now, I'd like to introduce the panel we have today. Representing Scottish Conservative Party, Douglas Lumsden, MSP. Representing the SNP, Gillian Martin, MSP. Representing Reform UK, Helen McDade. Representing Scottish Labour, Caitlin Stott. Representing Scottish Green Party, Mark Ruskell, MSP. And Liam MacArthur will be joining us. I'd like to note that there are, of course, more parties on the ballot paper, but we have invited each of the parties that are currently represented in Parliament. To ensure the discussion is both inclusive and orderly, we are using Slido to manage questions. The platform allows every member of the audience to upvote the questions they want to see answered or add in questions themselves. As your host, I will be picking out questions from Slido, so if you've got a problem, that'll be my fault, and you can come and talk to me about it afterwards, as well as taking questions in the room. Please note we have enabled moderation, this to prevent duplication of questions and ensure we get through a wide range of topics. To give you an idea of how strong the feeling is about the issues that we're discussing today, there are already over 80 questions on Slido. So the more we get through, the more we can make the most of this opportunity. If you're watching online, when submitting questions, you can click labels to add your location if you would like to. If you see a question you agree with on Slido, give it a thumbs up and it'll help me navigate and see which questions are most popular. I think behind me you'll have the information about Slido. You can access Slido if you're in the room as well, if you'd prefer to do that rather than ask the question directly. You scan the code on screen or go to slido.com and enter the code 3642015. Candidates will be asked to respond to each question in turn, and a different candidate will be asked to answer first, so there is no hierarchy in response. I will interrupt and ask to move on if the candidate overruns their allocated time, seeks to dominate discussion, or takes the discussion away from the question being asked, or falls too deeply into my opinion of party spin. Candidates will be cut off if they go over 2 minutes. I will ensure all candidates are given equal opportunity to contribute. If candidates wish to comment on each other's contributions, then I will ensure that an equal opportunity is given to each candidate to make a comment. Okay, I think that's everything I need to start with. Also, there are no fire exits. There are no fire drills this evening. There are fire exits. We've not locked you in for this discussion. There are no fire drills, but there is a fire exit right there. No, it's not good for the insurance. You're quite right. Okay, so let's get started with the first question. And I'll start from whoever is closest to me through to the end of the panel. So if we can start with the question. Polling, as I've mentioned, consistently shows high public support for action to address the climate crisis and protect nature. What climate and nature action would you prioritise early in the next Parliament? Helen, if I could start with yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Is this mic on?
You can just use the handheld mic right there. Thank you.
Is it on?
That's it on now.
Cheers. Thanks. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for inviting me. And yeah, great. And also apologies in advance. I do have to leave at 8:45 to travel by public transport. So thanks. My concern that I would bring up straight away if I was in the Parliament, I would try to get the planning on nuclear changed so that we can get a small modular reactor in Scotland. This would bring in a carbon neutral way of getting power. There's quite a lot of problems about our energy grid, and this would be one way to deal with that and also help us get some jobs for the youngsters. I grew up in Thurso. It was a vibrant place. We had Dounreay. It wasn't closed down because it didn't work. It was closed down because it was thought to be too expensive. Energy is expensive. It was mentioned earlier, so that's what I would do. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Blimey. Okay. The first thing I would do is ensure that the Scottish Government takes a very strong stance on oil and gas. What I want to see is no new oil and gas developments in the North Sea because we have more oil and gas than we can afford to burn. But alongside that, we need a really robust plan for ensuring that the jobs are there for the renewable supply chain. But I think beyond that, what I'm really seeing is the power of communities at the moment in tackling climate change, in tackling the nature emergency. There's that old green saying, think global, act local. And what I'm seeing across my region is communities that are really delivering the solutions. In Fintry, Stirlingshire, we've got a community that owns a wind turbine, and they're investing the profits from wind energy back into the homes in their community to make them cheaper to run, taking people out of fuel poverty. I'm seeing in Kinrossshire, in Glenfarga, a community that has stepped in where there is no bus service, and they're running their own bus service, giving all those people with free bus passes an actual service that they can get on. And I'm seeing the impact of Nature Restoration Fund as well. Hundreds and hundreds of projects funded by the NRF that was set up by the Greens when we were in government. And this is communities that are doing the rewilding, that are restoring our seas, that are restoring our woodlands. And I also see coastal communities across Scotland that are ready to step up, that are ready to make the decisions about how to manage fish stocks, how to repair our oceans, how to bring in new marine protected areas. So there are big national policies that we need, but we also mustn't forget about the power of communities to tackle the nature and climate emergencies and ensure that we've got a better quality of living and got better communities and better environment in Scotland.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think first thing I would do is to have an achievable and manageable plan to net zero. I feel just now that the Scottish Government don't go down a path with a plan to net zero that is not affordable and I feel is going to cause a lot of damage to the livelihoods of many workers right across Scotland. Not surprisingly, I've got a different view on oil and gas to Mark. I have a strong view that while we still consume oil and gas in this country, it is better for our jobs, better for the environment, and better for our finances that we actually use our own domestic supplies. There's things also around woodland creation, where there's been, targets set that haven't been met. We need to review that. We need to make sure that our farmers aren't, we stand by our farmers. There's been some targets mentioned that haven't been taken around reducing livestock numbers, so we need to look after our farmers, and we also need to look after our fishermen as well. Yes, there may need to be some changes about what they do, but if that happens, then they should be properly compensated. We can't leave them behind.
Thank you. Caitlin.
Hi, thank you. So I think that for a climate crisis to be resolved, and that is something that is definitely a first priority for me, a climate emergency to be resolved, we also need to address the biodiversity crisis that's happening, and I think that would be a huge priority for me. I think as well, we like Douglas, actually, we need real and actionable targets to reduce carbon emissions in Scotland. And further to that, I think that we need a just transition not to just be a phrase. It needs to be able to sustain jobs through the climate change. And I think, as well as that, the other thing I would mention would be a vibrant and working public transport system, and that's something that's really important in the constituency that I'm standing for. Finally, I really want a natural Scotland that future generations can enjoy as much as I have, and that works for the people of Scotland.
Thank you. Gillian.
So I've got a list of things that I would like to get hit the ground running with, and the first of them would be convening all cabinet secretaries to ask them how, well, to have a discussion on delivery of the climate change plan. By the end of the month of March and the end of the Parliament session, the final climate change plan has got 150 new actions. But of course, a plan is not delivery, so I would want to see delivery plans from every Cabinet Secretary, but also it's not just going to be government that's delivering that, so we would be working with all stakeholders to make sure there's delivery on that. We'll also be setting up a marine recovery fund so that we can take funding from renewables and the licenses there and put it into marine recovery. And I would also be putting the consultation and fisheries management measures for inshore MPAs in place. But one of the other things, and the cost has been mentioned, the cost of doing nothing in climate change is far greater than the cost of delivering a climate change plan. In fact, the climate change plan is also a blueprint for improvement in the economy, and it's also got a lot of co-benefits associated with it in public health. So one of the things that we'd be doing is also looking to how we can create markets so there's investment coming into climate action, because government can't do it alone. And one of the areas that I'm very keen to work with a housing cabinet secretary is have a route map and a plan of heat networks throughout Scotland, so that we can learn from the examples that have been in other cities where they've put heat networks in place, like Bristol. Bristol said, as a result of doing their heat network, that the best thing they could have done if they were going to do it again is work with other cities so that they can crowd in private finance and we can really get going in decarbonising heat.
Thank you. I will start by taking one of the questions that are on Slido online. We are at 116 questions now. I am going to try my best with this, but also please do remember to upvote the ones that are already there to avoid duplication. So we have one that has got 43 votes, and I will start with that, and then I will come to the audience in the room for questions. Many key marine conservation measures have been delayed time and again. Should you win, will you commit in your first 100 days in office to run a consultation on fisheries management measures for Scotland's inshore marine protected areas and priority marine features? Mark, can I start with you and we'll go round? Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, absolutely happy to commit to that. But I'm getting deja vu here because we were talking about bringing in management measures 5 years ago when I think I was at the last link hustings. It's a disgrace that it's taken this long to put in the measures that were needed then to protect our seas. I think we need to rethink the way, though, that we're managing or not managing our seas and coastlines, because we have a Marine Directorate in the Scottish Government that is centralising decision-making. We had the disaster that the Scottish Government rolled out of highly protected marine areas that were not welcomed by communities. And, there's a better way to do this. We can decentralise power. We can set some very clear objectives for marine restoration, but we need to do that by taking communities and sectors with us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the conversation needs to be. It's fine drawing lines on a map, but it's the actions that are needed to actually protect and restore the environment that is so important. And if we can restore the marine environment, of course, we can create jobs as well for fishing sectors that are long-term. We can restore some of the abundance in our oceans that has been lacking for so long. So, still got a degraded marine environment. I just think, what a waste. What a waste for the environment. What a waste for the economy as well.
Thank you.
I think all consultation needs to be proper consultation, and it needs the stakeholders right at the heart of it. So I'm thinking fishermen, marine scientists, communities, they need to be playing into that consultation, because I think what we've seen with the HPMAs, that there were communities who were rightfully fearful of what was going to happen to their communities. They were thinking, well, you know, rural depopulation could well happen. So I think we need to make sure that they are at the heart of it. We also need to look at the spatial squeeze going in our marine environment. You know, we've got renewables, cables. That's all playing a part and playing fears within our fishers as well. So anything that needs to be done, there's going to have to be proper consultation and proper compensation involved in it. And we need a pragmatic, scientific-based approach.
Caitlin, thank you.
Thanks. I think that my easiest answer would be yes to Mark. I think I absolutely agree with what he was saying. I think that, in fact, the first Marine Protection Bill was 2010, and now it's the 16th year, and it's not working properly. And we need to kind of like, if we're going to try and really conserve what's in our oceans for both our generation and future generations to come and bring it back, we need to make sure that our marine protection areas are working properly, that they're monitored and enforced properly at the moment, which is not happening right now. I think as well we need to, the point about consultation is really important. We need to bring those communities with us. That's super important as well. So I think ultimately I'd look at reviewing where the marine protection areas are, making sure that they're in the right places at the right times, make sure that they work with communities. And yeah, that's ultimately I agree.
Thank you.
So simple answer is yes, and I actually would have liked to have done it before the election. But they're setting up a new system where people are able to upload quite a lot of material and also maps associated with what we were actually talking about. And we had some issues with some of the technology, but also some of the data sets in there. So I was very keen that we get it right. And the reason why is probably because as a result of what happened with the highly protected marine areas, is that when a consultation goes out, it has to come with all the information on what people are actually being asked about, and so that there can't be any misinformation out there, or it can't be captured by any groups that don't want to see any kind of like protection at all in the areas as well. So the simple answer is yes, it's one of the first things that certainly, if I'm retaining my job, that I'll want to put that consultation out. What I would also say is that those are maybe a little sceptical about the consultation even going out now know that, yes, it's been delayed for the reasons that I've set out, but they know it's coming. They know it's coming. Certainly, if SNP are back in government, it's coming and they can prepare for that. But the whole process should be an awful lot easier. This is very complex information that we're dealing with, lots of data, and that data has been uploaded so that people can access it. So, and also, everyone here will know that the Marine and Coastal Action Plan was consulted on last year as well. So a lot of the scenarios in that are going to be rolled out as well. But one of the other things, and I want to come back to the Marine Recovery Fund as well, we want to be working with stakeholders and how we can take any of the licence money coming from offshore renewables and work with all stakeholders so that we have a strategic marine recovery plan that is funded by this money as well to augment what we're already doing paid by government finances.
Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably nobody who doesn't agree that it's not right to be dredging in protected areas or areas which should be protected. So, I mean, there's no problem about agreeing in that. And, you know, I think probably we all kind of groan when we hear there's another consultation. So, you know, I think there are too many consultations and they can easily run into the ground. And there are some things that we really need to look at. We need to look at protecting our fisheries for our own people. We have the opportunity to do that. We should be thinking about what jobs are involved. You know, it doesn't do to say, oh, well, let's compensate them and take some more boats out. You know, we've had years of that happening where we have got rid of our own fishers by saying, oh, well, you know, we've got a cut here in the quota, you put your boat up and we'll give you some money. We want an active fisheries, and fishermen feel badly let down, and a lot of those people are people who are, you know, maybe small independent boats, and, you know, they're watching dredgers come in from elsewhere and destroying the ground. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious we need to act on that and act on it quickly.
I've had a request to reintroduce the panel and the parties they're representing for those who are online who might have joined later, so I will do that. We have Helen McDade representing Reform UK, Mark Ruskell representing Scottish Green Party, Douglas Lumsden representing the Scottish Conservative Party, Caitlin Stott representing the Scottish Labour Party, Gillian Martin representing the SNP, and Liam MacArthur, who is tied up in presiding officer work, who will hopefully be joining us later. So if you're online, I'm hoping I've been able to very quickly bring you up to date. So I would like to go to questions that are in the audience now. So if you have a question, if you could raise your hand, and then we will go back to Slido. And there's one question, well, there's multiple questions. Let me go to yourself there in the fourth row with the dark curly hair. Thank you. I think there might be a roving mic somewhere. If not, that's fine. Thank you. Thanks very much. If you switch it on, make sure it's green. Thank you.
Hi. Most of the agricultural support budget still goes to farmers based on how much land they have rather than what they do with it. Do you agree that the largest basic payment should be capped so that more money can be spent on schemes that have a positive impact on climate and nature?
Thank you. Douglas, I'll start with yourself first, if you don't mind.
I think there is a review of the farm payments that are taking place just now. And, you know, I think we need to make sure that we protect the prime agricultural land for farming. I think we see some of that being eroded just now. So, you know, it's vital that we continue supporting our farmers. You know, food security is very important. So I think any changes to the agricultural support needs to be, once again, very careful and working with the farming industry and not something that's done to them.
Thanks. I think, as far as my opinion goes, I think that there needs to be a balance between farming and obviously making sure that those farming measures contribute to the environment, and more so now. I remember seeing a statistic that said we only have a certain amount of topsoil left to actually sustain farming over the next couple of generations, and I think that's something that's like a real crisis coming up. I do think there needs to be a real understanding that farmers can just as much contribute to the environment as they can harm it, and there needs to be a balance between the two. There's tons of excellent examples of farms across Scotland that are doing brilliant work in terms of making sure that the programmes and the things that they put across are environmentally friendly, and I do think that payments and stuff should be tied to that as well. Should be celebrating that. Is that the word? But yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Thank you.
So rural support plan is in the process. Obviously, Mary Goujon is the Cabinet Secretary for that, and obviously we've got a Minister for Agriculture as well. One of the things that you're absolutely right, that there has been a historic yield or production and area, and that's really been the things that just effectively inform farm support payments. But I think there's actually a large body in the farming community that actually recognise there's actually a business case for doing this as well. So those farmers that are maybe not with that in terms of, you know, putting their efforts into biodiversity, putting their efforts into types of planting that will sequester carbon, etc., they're actually, and soil health's been mentioned there, they're actually draining the land that they're actually relying on for the production of their. So what we need to do is we need to put a system in place. Certainly, I think, to be honest, I'll be frank, I think it's actually long overdue that we need to have a payment support system that is a new IT system that allows it to be easy for farmers to actually record what they're doing in order all the areas of work that they're doing that isn't just about yield and isn't just about area. It's about planting, it's about hedgerows, it's about what fuels they're using, etc., etc. And there could be a lot more put into that as well. And that way we're actually going to be rewarding almost like a whole farm situation that will actually be good for the health of the farm, good for the bottom line, but we do need to work with farmers on this, because there is an awful lot of farmers out there who maybe not the voices that you hear most, who actually understand that this is good for their business. If they're protecting the soil and they're doing things for biodiversity, that's, you know, the pollinators, then they're getting better results and they're able to bring other farmers with them. Government can't dictate, it has to be done with all the stakeholders involved, particularly farmers that understand that this is the right thing to do and the best thing to do for their business.
Thank you. Helen, can I ask you to go next? Thank you.
Yeah, the question was, should the largest payments be capped? And I think there's certainly a case for that. I think we have to remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to have food security. It's important that the best land for growing food is not taken out for something which can't be recovered in most cases. There would have to be a good case for that. So that, you know, we have to look at what we're giving money for. There has to be a living income for farmers. You know, farmers have been paid atrociously, particularly in the less favoured areas. We have to decide if we want to keep them there or if we want it, you know, deserted. And we have sudden changes for the subsidy systems that people have. So, you know, suddenly they're going to get inheritance tax, you know, huge problems there. Sometimes they're maybe going to be getting a subsidy that they planted a shelter belt for, but they need several years for that to, you know, to come to useful purpose. And then suddenly the government decides they're going to change that system. And these things are happening all the time. So I don't know about the specific level that would be, so, you know, that's obviously something you know about, but certainly we need to look at the outcomes from it, and at the moment it's not delivering.
Thank you, Mark.
So again, I think we're stuck. You know, we're stuck with a farming policy from 1946 rather than 2026. You know, we've got new challenges today. Yes, we need food security, but we're not actually growing and rearing the things in Scotland that we eat. You know, we don't have market gardens, as many market gardens. We're not producing vegetables. We're producing a lot of barley, malting barley for whiskey production, but we're not actually producing the food that we eat week in, week out. So we don't have these local food supply chains that are really meeting our needs. You know, again, you know, 5 years ago, we were on these platforms talking about the same issue, the need for agricultural reform. We've got £700 million every single year going into subsidising the status quo. And yes, there are big questions about whether subsidies should be capped. I also meet a lot of farmers who feel, quite frankly, trapped within the system that they're in. You know, they can't go and move over to some of their land to plant trees, because if they plant trees in that land, then they lose their subsidy payment and they lose their livelihood. So I think we've got to look outside the box here. You know, there's been suggestions made about maybe a basic income for farmers. There's a need perhaps for transition funding to enable, you know, loosen the rules, but allow farmers to make that transition to more mixed land use, which could be for biodiversity. It could be for diversification on farm. At the moment, we have a very fixed agricultural system. The problem is that we've spent 5 years talking with an SNP government about this, and there's still no progress being made. And I fear that, you know, the conversation here is really between the NFUS and government officials rather than the people in this room and the farmers who actually want to make change and actually want to change things for the good.
Thank you. I'm going to return back to Slido. Again, we've got a lot of online questions. And the one that has been voted the highest, I will ask now. How do we tackle the insatiable energy demand for AI data centres? Do we allow them to expand or limit or stop their advancement? Caitlin, I'll go to you first for this one.
So I think that, yes, I think that we should be limiting their expansion. I think that, you know, AI has some fantastic benefits for people in the medical profession, fantastic benefits for people who are, you know, for people who are looking for rare diseases and things like that. But it also comes at a huge cost. It comes at a cost of water production, energy suction out of the land, and it can't just be a general all guns blazing into this brave new world. And I think we really need to look at all of the consequences of what the kind of advent of AI means to us, not just for the environment, but also linked to that for people's jobs, people's kind of careers and livelihoods in the future. It's going to make huge changes to where we are. So I think we need to go forward with it, but go forward with it with a real understanding of where we want to end up and how we want to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're only just beginning to realise the impacts of AI from a climate point of view, and in terms of a resource point of view. I got a bit of a telling off from my artist niece on two fronts, because I made a Christmas card with my cat as an angel, and I did it on AI because I can't draw. And she's 20, and she told me, first of all, you're taking a job away from an artist, i.e. you should have paid me, Auntie Gillian. And that she also said, you realise the amount of energy that these things use. And I actually was schooled by her on this. So I think that's a live conversation out there. So I think in terms of the demand, you need to do exactly what my niece did to me and actually explain that when you're using these things, the amount of resource they're actually taking. Because I don't think you can ban things like AI. AI's got a purpose. It's a thing that's there, and it's a thing that's been used. But for those that care about the environment, then you need to understand what it is you're doing whatever it is you're doing with AI. I also think the national planning framework has to be used a lot better than it is right now. I mean, I think certainly we've got enough disused land, and we've got enough brownfield sites in Scotland, or indeed derelict land that's not been used effectively. These should be the sites that, if things are going to happen in terms of AI data centres, whatever. And also we need to be doing something, and I've written to the UK government about how we can incentivise private wire. So we've got constrained wind payments going to generate electricity, and they're being paid to turn them off, when in fact actually we could have the private wire situations going into either data centres, or they could be actually providing cheaper electricity for heat networks as well. So sorry, I'm about to get a row from Talat for going off piste.
Thank you. Helen.
Thanks. It's great to know that governments have now realised that wind farms get paid for being turned off, because it is quite an issue. But to come back to the question, AI is probably the biggest question facing us. We don't realise it, but it's just astonishing the speed it's going at and the amount of energy it uses. So it's huge, and it's no use saying, oh, it's all right because we'll do renewables and it'll be electricity. People talk about electricity as if it's actually a source of energy. It's a way of bringing energy to something. It has to be made by something. So this is a huge issue, and I think we haven't realised it. And also we haven't realised the impact it's going to have on people's jobs. We haven't, and just telling us what to do. I mean, you put your phone on, you just want to phone somebody, and AI says, can I help you write this? Can I help you, this is what AI thinks about something. So it's really galloped along, and it's hard to see how to stop it, but we really should look at the amount of energy that it uses and say, where would that come from? Because at the moment, we're looking at our energy system is not fit for purpose anyway. Yeah, it's a really important question. It also uses a lot of water, AI, so that's another issue.
Thank you.
AI can bring benefits, right? And I think AI can bring benefits in a low-carbon world as well. But, the question here is about who controls the systems. And I don't want Scotland's energy system to be designed by Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. We need to start from the perspective of having a Scottish Government energy strategy that identifies what our needs are as a society, and then we build the infrastructure that we need alongside that. Now, that could be wind farm development, it could be battery storage systems, but what I'm concerned about is there now being a rush towards developing AI data centres. Many of you will have seen that the Mossmoran plant is now shut on 2nd of February. Scottish Enterprise are now looking at what other industries could move to that site to retain jobs, and one of the options is an AI data centre. Now, that's not going to bring back 300 skilled jobs into Fife. It's going to create half a dozen jobs in the area. So, we need to look at where we're investing in the energy system. AI is an important component of that, but it's governments and communities that should be deciding where these developments go, rather than simply being, speculative applications from the data industry.
Yeah, for me, AI it's out the box. It's here to stay now, and I would much rather have my data housed in this country than with China or Trump. And if we've got, we're being told we've got an abundance of offshore wind energy, instead of getting that onshore and then having pylons right across the country to put it to somewhere else for them to have data centres, why don't we make use of that energy ourselves? There is issues around the cost of that we need to get the cost of that electricity down. But people are right, there is constraint payment. So if there's a change in regulations that means that we can actually use that excess power, because, well, there's not always excess power, but when there is excess power, we can use it for things like data centres. And I think that would be a good thing for our data security and also for jobs in this country.
Thank you. Yes, we have an intervention from the table, and I'll give opportunity for others to come back on this question.
I don't think you've had Caitlin. Do you want to have Caitlin first?
Caitlin started this one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things about what both Mark and Douglas just said, and it comes down to wishful thinking. So Mark says, well, we could use wind farms, more wind farms, and we could use batteries. Batteries store energy. It has to come from somewhere. You know, we've got to be real about what we can get from renewables. And unfortunately, often you're getting told something that is not true. I'm here because I worked in the environment movement, and I saw what was said about this 20 years ago, and I watched how that debate has changed, and I watched what people say, and you are not being told the truth. We are at the moment already with an unstable grid. Engineers will tell you that there's a real risk that you will start getting demand management power cuts. Just need to look at Scottish Power and see that they put out letters to people saying, if we have this, this is when you'll be turned off. Go online and you can see when you'll be turned off. So that's not about to happen this year, probably. It's a few years down the line. And here we are talking about huge increases in energy that were going to be used. And, you know, we've got to start talking realistically. So I heard somebody gasp when I said nuclear. So I want to know where you're going to get that extra energy from. Either Douglas, who also said we'll use all that offshore wind.
I'd like us to stay on track with the question that's been asked. So I would ask Mark if he would like to respond to the question and provide further details to the question asked of the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've responded to that, though. But I mean, the supplementary from Helen, I mean, I've known Helen for many years. And I remember 20 years ago, Helen saying that onshore wind wouldn't work and it was going to bust the electricity system and we'd all be paying higher bills and everything else.
Misinformation.
The fact is that, you know, 20 years on, we've got onshore wind that is working, it's on the system, it is lowering the cost of electricity. The reason why electricity costs are high is because of the cost of gas, not because of the cost of onshore wind. We've got renewable energy systems that are paying out to communities. And we've had a massive reduction in the carbon content of our electricity over the last 20 years. 90% reduction in the carbon content of our electricity due to the rollout of onshore wind. So simply, it's not been the case, Helen, that onshore wind has not worked. It has worked. There are, of course, considerations about how many wind farms we want and where we want them. But of course they work. Of course they're playing an important role within our energy system.
Would anyone, would anybody else on the panel like to respond to the point, and then I will be moving on completely. Thank you.
75% of Scotland's electricity is generated by renewables. It is a success story. It is a success story. It is a success story for onshore wind, and it's going to be an even bigger success story as we build out offshore winds, particularly in Scotland, where this would be a commodity that even if with the build out of the new infrastructure to bring more power onto the grid and to connect more projects onto the grid, which is long overdue, is that there will be the feedstock for a great deal of innovation, particularly around things like hydrogen production, which will allow us to decarbonise our industrial plants, not just in Scotland, but in the whole of the UK and indeed in Europe in particular, where they don't have that capacity, the same capacity we have in Scotland. It is the biggest economic prospectus for Scotland, renewables. We're already doing very, very well, and that's why we're getting so much inward investment for other companies that want to base themselves here. For example, Japanese companies coming over and building cable factories, technological companies coming over to Glasgow for reasons that they're telling me is because we have got a net zero ambition that they want to be part of. It is a success story, and we should be very proud of it.
Would you like to come back? I'm going to ask other candidates who have not had an opportunity to respond. So that would be yourself or Douglas, and then I'll be moving on to the next question.
I just wanted to ask, is that why your party wants to get rid of the Department for Net Zero?
Is what?
Is that why your party wants to get rid of the Department for Net Zero, just give up?
Because it's, yeah, the country is going to have great difficulties. And, you know, Mark said some things that were not true, but obviously I can't counter them all just now. So,
Thank you. We will be moving on. Would you like to respond only to this point? And then
Only
I'll move on to the
briefly,
question?
you know, I think the best form of energy is as an energy mix. I think it needs to be all things. I think it needs to be some renewables. It needs probably needs to be some nuclear. Needs to be some gas as well. I think that's the best way forward and the safest way forward, because I don't believe that we can put all our eggs into one basket of wind. We need something when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining.
I think it's particularly important if scrutiny comes from those who have given us their time in the audience and those online, given that I'm at 141 questions. So I would like to ensure that those who have given us their time and are in the audience, both online and in the audience, are the people that I get to prioritise. Do we have some questions in the audience? Yes, yourself there, just with the glasses in the third row. Thank you.
I want to ask what your parties are going to do for communities around the world that have done very little to cause the climate crisis, but are bearing the brunt of that through loss and damage. Like, for example, are you going to commit to increasing the Climate Justice Fund?
Thank you. I'll start with Gillian. Thank you very much.
Answer this. So the first country to put money into a loss and damage fund, and also as a result of hosting a COP at Glasgow, that was the announcement that was made, and year on year we have had loss and damage funding, and of course now we're able to go to our global fora like COP and actually talk about what that's actually achieved. The relatively small amount of money that Scotland's been able to put in loss and damage has changed lives. It has changed lives, and I think that it's not something that gets talked enough. It was good to see in COP in Brazil that there's a loss and damage fund being committed to. The only problem is that we need to see it actually hit the ground running. One of the things that we've done with the Climate Justice Fund and the Loss and Damage Fund is we've actually trusted communities to know what's best for them. I would be very wary of that money being given to governments who think they know what their communities necessarily need. What we've done is trust people to actually know what they need, how they can build back better, how they can rebuild their farms, rebuild their schools, rebuild their homes. They know what they need, and it's no questions asked. You know what you need, and we trust you, because after all, as you say, they've done the least to cause the problem that they're facing.
Thank you. Next will be Helen. Thank you.
Do you want this one?
thanks. Yeah, I think adaptation, we have to start thinking about adaptation. Given that I agree with some of what Julian said there, we have to be giving money directly. If we want, if there's communities abroad, for instance, that are struggling with certain things, say, taking the Pacific Islanders, maybe we'd be better giving them money to help them build their houses on a higher level, if that's what might be needed, or things like that. So adaptation is almost always cheaper than what we're trying to do at the moment. So that's what I would say, give the money directly where it's needed.
Thank you. Mark?
I mean, of course we need to be investing in loss and damage and reparation, and Scotland has some great links with countries like Malawi, and we can do good work on the ground. But the debt that we owe the Global South is absolutely vast. We are never going to be able to pay that off. And the best way for us to deliver climate justice is to get serious about climate change, because a world where we're reaching 3 degrees is going to be unlivable. It's going to be unlivable in this country. It's going to be unlivable in the Global South. And quite frankly, I find it disgraceful that there are parties standing in this election who deny that climate change is real. And I think that's disgraceful, and we need to move on.
I'll be honest with the questioner there. No, we wouldn't increase it. I think for some of the reasons we've heard from Gillian, actually, there's probably still some governance issues around where that money is spent and what it's spent on. And I also feel that we've got problems in this country that we need to fix. And we also need to remember, in terms of the UK, we're only, I think it's 0.7% of global emissions. There are countries like China, US, Russia, India that emit significantly more than us. And when you look at Scotland's figure, UK figure is 0.7, Scotland's figure will probably be about 1/10 of that. So I'll be honest with you, no, I wouldn't increase it.
Thank you. Firstly, I would say yes, absolutely. We support the Climate Justice Fund. We support it making sure that it makes a real difference to communities across the world, because yes, we may make very low levels or lowish levels of CO2 emissions at the moment, but the fact is that our history shows us that we were the ones who started this, and we started the fire. We need to be able to help put it out. I think that what Gillian says is absolutely right, that needs to be done in consultation with the people, or with the people, not to the people that we have affected with our decisions in the past. I think, yes, there are governance issues around about how you give those funds out, but that doesn't mean that you stop. That means that you make your decisions better. And I think that, yeah, that's kind of where I'll go.
Thank you. I'll be returning to Slido, and we'll hopefully get another microphone for you. Again, we have an uprated question here. Very large areas of upland Scotland are used either as grouse moors or deer stalking. Such land management prevents native woodland establishment, either by burning or overgrazing, thus reducing biodiversity. And what will you do to stop these? What will you do to stop these damaging activities? And I'm back to start again. So Helen, it would be yourself going first. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to see more of a focus on deer management, actually. I mean, I remember meeting the Deer Commission chair 20 years ago, whenever it was, and saying to him, we need to do more to use the venison. And he said, oh, that's not within our remit. And, you know, that's not really very helpful. We do have too many deer on the hills. It's a problem for hill farmers who have, you know, have the ability to have to deal with them. And now there's stronger regulation about dealing with this. And they're not finding a viable route to move on what is good meat that has not been treated by anything, that is brought up naturally. And so we definitely need to deal with that. And I know somebody who's doing a social enterprise to try and work with it on her farm to make her farm viable. So we certainly need to get to grips with that. Regarding grouse management, yeah, there's issues there. We do need to look at that. And, you know, that is something which is a problem if you just have a uniform method of using a land. It's not biodiverse. So yeah, we need to deal with it.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, look, I'm going to be more positive here about the progress that I think has been made in this session of Parliament, because, you know, Parliament's just passed a Natural Environment Bill. It's now an Act. It was a bill that was started by my Green colleague Lorna Slater when she was Biodiversity Minister. It was taken on by Gillian Martin and a range of other ministers. And I think what we've seen through that bill is now significant progress in managing deer numbers. It's not perfect. I would like to see a national deer management plan, but we've actually now got the powers for Nature Scot to be able to enforce the deer levels and to actually bring them down where there are estates that are not doing that. I think also with grouse management, you know, 5 years ago, it was unthinkable that we could have had a licensing scheme brought in for driven grouse moors, and we've now got that, and there's been huge progress within the Scottish Parliament on that. I think there's more to go, though, and I think for me, this comes back to land reform. I think we had quite a disappointing land reform bill that went through the Scottish Parliament. It didn't really alter that balance of large landowners and communities. And we need to break that in the next session of Parliament. We need to open up the opportunities for rewilding and investment. And I think there are amazing things that are happening on the ground everywhere across Scotland, but it's being hampered by land ownership. And until we get away from the fact that, you know, just a few hundred people own the vast majority of Scotland's land, then we're always going to be constraining opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree totally with deer management. And I think it's, I also agree that it's good that we're actually using the meat now and not just throwing it out. And I think it's vital that we control deer numbers if we're looking to try and reach our forestry goals, something that we haven't managed to hit so far, and probably needs to be a greater emphasis on that in the next term of Parliament.
Thank you.
So I think Mark's going to be kind of grumpy with me because I'm basically copying his answers, but I agree that I think deer management is incredibly important. I think we had a natural environment that had some really good measures in it around about deer management. I think that we need to see how that beds in and how it actually affects the numbers in Scotland. I think that we also need, we just need to look if it's working and make sure that we continue to mitigate the kind of damage that deer do in Scotland as a whole. We also need to make sure that we support other areas of biodiversity growth across Scotland, so that when the deer go, there's something there to kind of to replace them and to to rewild them, I suppose. Just a little thing to say about grouse moors as well. I think again you're absolutely right that really it's a land reform issue. I think that it is obscene that a couple of hundred people in Scotland own most of Scotland and nobody really knows who they are. So I think that if you are one of those landowners with vast grouse estates, you need to at least have the responsibility to make sure that they are managed properly and that they are providing benefits to the community rather than just yourself.
Thank you.
So a few people have mentioned the Natural Environment Bill, which came through, which actually had a lot of measures in there for the control of deer and also making sure that we're using the meat from deer more effectively. Part of our food chain is healthy meat. If meat is your thing, then you are less of a carbon footprint associated with deer than any other type of meat as well. But also the Wildlife Management and Muirburn Bill is something that Mark mentioned as well. So I had the Wildlife Management and Muirburn Bill until the very last moment when there was a cabinet, there was a reshuffle, and I wasn't able to take it through to the stage 3 conclusion. But I'm still very proud of what I did manage to get through in that. So I handed it over to Jim Fairley to bring it home. But one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we now license estates. And I think that any business, if you're doing the right thing, you should not be afraid of licensing. So they now are licensed, and my goodness, the sky hasn't fallen in, but you would have thought so from some people that they would. Also, we're not allowed to snare foxes anymore, and I'm very proud of that coming through, that barbaric act that was leaving foxes in pain and away from their kits. It was shameful, and we've been able to do that as well. We've also got targets for nature restoration in the Natural Environment Bill as well, and I think that's going to be something that we'll want to see estates in particular showing their credentials in terms of the biodiversity improvements that they make, and indeed the peatland restoration opportunities and woodland planting opportunities that are open to all land managers, not just estates. There are decent estates out there. There are wildlife estates. We shouldn't all be tarring them all with the same brush. Some are doing really good work. Others need to be brought on. And if you're and if you want to do good things for the environment, you shouldn't be afraid of licensing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the audience now for multiple questions that are here. There is a gentleman in the 4th row with a striped jumper on. I'm trying to do my best Fiona Bruce here. In the 4th row in the middle. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'd like the panel to address the issue of the Forestry Grants system, because that is the main financial driver of what happens in the uplands. And I've been involved in dealing with a few of those schemes from people like Brewdog and Oxygen Conservation. And I would suggest about £88 million is to be spent this year on this scheme. I reckon most of that money is going to waste because we're planting the wrong trees in the wrong places by the wrong people. It's damaging wildlife, it's damaging landscapes, and it's not delivering the carbon capture which people dream about. And it's not delivering anything for local communities.
Thank you.
The main beneficiaries are corporate interests and financial speculators in faraway places. So I would like the panel to agree that this scheme should be suspended from the next Parliament going on, and radical reform be brought in for the Forestry Grants Scheme. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mark, I'll start with yourself. Thank you.
Well, the Forestry Grants Scheme needs to deliver the public interest. I think the private interest can be delivered by investors who want to invest in commercial forestry, but the public interest needs to be reflected in native woodland planting. And, you know, we're seeing so much money spent on fencing off areas, which, to be honest, it would be better if those estates were open and we could actually rewild those estates and allow native regeneration. So I do question the amount of money that's being put in right now, and I think the Royal Society of Edinburgh produced a very good report. Dave's nodding as he was involved with it a number of months ago, which, you know, I think has been very useful in perhaps breaking the consensus and in asking the questions about where money is being spent. But, you know, we do need to change the land use in our uplands. We are going to need commercial forestry, okay, in the right place. But where should the public interest go, and what should public money be spent on? And I think, you know, there's good questions there, but there will need to be a balance. There will need to be a balance.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree that we need a full review of the forestry grants. You know, in the course of work of land reform, myself and Mark were, obviously we took evidence about companies like Gresham, you know, a huge amount of public money that they got through SNIB. Oxygen conservation, some of the stories we heard around that, and Brewdog as well that you mentioned, that, you know, a huge amount of public finance went into that, and then it's almost been abandoned as far as I know. So I think it needs a complete overhaul to make sure that we get value for public money and to get the outcome that I think we all want.
I think you're right. I think that forestry grant systems do need to be absolutely overhauled. Our woodlands are our resource and they are our pride, and they should definitely be protected by our government. I think that I'm really interested in making sure that our natural and ancient woodlands are restored. I think that we need, like you said, the right trees in the right places, and we need to make sure that the money follows the public good, and that's incredibly important. I think if you look at, like, obviously overplanting of things like Sitka spruces, which can spread seeds all over the place, it doesn't help to fence them off. It helps to make sure that we have more rewilding and more kind of natural, as I say, ancient woodlands.
Thank you, Julian.
So Scotland plants about 70% of the UK's trees, but you're absolutely right, it has to be the right trees. And I'm not going to make policy up in the hoof here, right? And I'm not going to commit to anything. I think it'd be disingenuous for me just to sit here and say, yes, sir, that's exactly what we're going to do. But in terms of looking at the public sector reform that's happening at the moment, we are looking at every single area of public spend and making sure that that spend is the most efficient. And, you know, Forestry Land Scotland is no different to any other of the arm's length bodies that get public money as well. 50% of the recent applications for Forestry Grants Scheme were small, under 20 hectares in size. So we need to be making sure that when we're putting things in place, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and disadvantaging some of the small holdings that are doing this work. So I think a review possibly, and certainly I'll take back your comments to my colleagues that deal with this.
Thank you. Helen. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, Dave, I'm sure you've identified the problem correctly, and it certainly needs looked at again. And, you know, I'm not an expert on it, so it's something that I would certainly need to go away and look at what would be the best thing. But I do find I'm hugely frustrated to drive past areas of bits of woodland that have been planted that seem to me, I'm no expert, but it seem to me they're never actually going to flourish to be mature trees, and it's some kind of compensatory planting is what I assume most of it is. And also I know there's huge concern about planting commercial forestry on good arable land, that, you know, once you've done it, you can't reclaim that. You know, you've got roots and then it's just there. So we do definitely need to look at it. Well, I'm not an expert, so I'd be speaking to you about it, Dave.
Thank you. I'll be going back to the Slido questions here, and we have one. Given the scientific evidence linking disease escapes and sea lice from salmon farms on the impacts on Scotland's endangered wild salmon, would your party remain open to considering an evidence-based pause on further industry expansion whilst these risks persist? And I'll start with Douglas, please.
Yes. Like Gillian, I'm not going to make up policy on the hoof, but I do know there's a big problem with salmon farming, and they really need to up their game. We see that with the amount of dead fish that comes from these farms. Although we have to recognise they are a huge industry within Scotland. They employ a lot of people, especially in some rural communities. So we've got to be careful. But, you know, we've had them at committee, and, you know, we've been quite clear with them that they really need to change. What we're seeing just now is, I was going to say criminal, I better not say that, but there is some practices in place that shouldn't be happening, and there needs to be, as I say, need to up their game.
Thank you.
I think, sorry, I'm okay to go. Yeah, I think that the evidence needs to be looked at. I think that salmon farming in itself is not an evil. It actually creates a lot of jobs in rural areas where depopulation is a big issue, and I think that the community benefits can be there. But having said that, it's a really big caveat. It needs to be safe salmon farming. It needs to be salmon farming that doesn't unnecessarily stress or upset or kill animals, and it needs to be make sure that it doesn't have untoward effects for the environment around about it. I think, as with most things of the environment, it's a balance, and we need to make sure that balance is struck properly.
Thank you.
So this is an animal health and a pollution issue as well. It's obviously the health of the fish themselves, and indeed what happens in some of our open waters where some of these farms are. And SEPA are involved in terms of licensing, and they have recently put in a lot more measures to deal with the condition of fish and indeed the environment as well. And that's been met by, it's been controversial. Let's put it that way. I'll probably stay away from saying anything that, and obviously I've had to work, because obviously SEPA are in my side of government in terms of environmental protection, but obviously I need to work with the colleagues in the rural affairs part of government as well, who have the interests indeed of the rural economy. And I think it's the same with them states. There are well-run, good salmon farms, and there are ones that are out there that are frankly bringing the whole industry down, and that's why you need robust licensing. And again, if you're doing the right thing, you shouldn't be frightened of the conditions around your license.
Thank you. Helen, followed by Mark.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I'm interested in this issue. I was a veterinary surgeon. Fish are not my thing, I have to be honest, but I have got an invitation and intend to go and visit some fish farms to see this issue. I think it is a problem, and one of the problems is we like cheap food. So, I mean, I'm going to ask, how many people in the audience eat salmon? I'm not including wild salmon. Not many? Or has everybody been honest? I know this seems quite popular in the shops. So it is an issue, because obviously it's much cheaper than wild salmon, and probably very few of us are eating that on a regular basis. And so we do need to look at this, and we do need to see whether there's a way of doing this sustainably. The sea lice has been a huge issue, and they have to get to grips with that now. I've looked at some of their data, and they're suggesting that putting it in deeper water, bigger sea farm, would address some of this, and we have to see if that's the case. But definitely needs looked at urgently.
Thank you. And finally, Mark.
So the question was about whether I would support a moratorium on expansion of salmon farms, and I would say absolutely yes, because I think we are long overdue a moratorium, long overdue. What we're seeing at the moment is a disaster in our seas. It's an animal health disaster. It's a pollution disaster. We've got pollutants like emamectin benzoate, highly toxic chemicals that are being just distributed onto the seabed. You've got all sorts of issues with, the wrasse cleaner fish, populations being decimated. So, the lists here are endless. And I think for any industry that is seeking to work within Scotland's environment, it has to work within the ecological limits, right? So we've got this global demand for salmon, which is vast because people like to eat it. It's a huge global demand for it. And the industry set its sights on production, on targets, but they're not taking into account the ecological limits of our seas, and that has to be the starting point. And then it's for industry then to innovate. If industry can work within those ecological limits, if they can provide a product that is clean, that is pollution-free, that has high animal welfare, then fine, it can exist under license, and it can innovate within that space. But at the moment, what we're seeing is a free-for-all, and it's just going completely wild, and it's blowing our ecological limits, and it's destroying our seas.
Thank you. I'm returning to questions in the audience. There is a question right at the back there with the young woman with glasses on. It's the best I can do. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Later this week, the UK government will be publishing their 7th national report outlining progress on the global biodiversity targets, and it's likely that that report is not going to show us anything positive, but a lack of progress. Earlier this week, UNEP, so the United Nations Environment Programme, also released a report on the state of finance, outlining that 30 times more funding goes towards activities that degrade our environment rather than protect and restore it. So what will you be doing to ensure that there will be adequate public resources spent on protecting and restoring our environments rather than degrading them?
Excellent. Caitlin, I'll be coming to yourself first.
Hi, thanks for bringing that up. I think it is a really, really important thing. And firstly, and most importantly, I would say that we would support the idea of 30% of biodiversity protected in Scotland by 2030. And I think that's something we would be strongly pushing towards. I think that the fact that 1 in 9 species in Scotland are under immediate threat of extinction is something that makes me incredibly sad, given that my kids aren't going to see the animals that I grew and the flora and the fauna that I grew up with. And I think that it's not, and I think that some good work has started in terms of the Natural Environment Bill, sorry, but I think we need to really actively push forward on how we make sure that not only we protect the biodiversity that we have right now, but we bring back the biodiversity that we have lost, unfortunately, with our actions over the last however many years.
Thank you, Gillian.
Happy for me to go? It's rightly been said, the Natural Environment Bill obviously is the framework for the targets to be set in the next Parliament as well. So obviously building on the work of the Natural Environment Bill as well, but also protecting, you just said protecting sources of funding. I don't just want to protect sources of funding in government, I want to leverage those sources of funding to crowd in private investment. There's pension funds out there, ethical pension funds out there that want to actually invest in Scotland, want to invest in our peatland restoration, want to invest in native woodland restoration, but also want to invest on the 30 by 30 sites as well. So natural and obviously nature restoration fund is very, very critical to this as well. That's where obviously people bid for projects that they have where they're actually bringing back biodiversity, they're halting biodiversity. The aim is to halt the decline in biodiversity by 2030, but then to become nature positive beyond that. So a range of actions. And obviously, if I'm still doing this job, then I'll do what I've been doing the past 2 years, and I'll keep my elbows out to protect the Nature Restoration Fund, which is at record levels.
Thank you. Helen, that microphone is working if you'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not all about funding. It is about there are balances to be made. So a land use strategy that actually looked at how everything interacts would have to make some hard decisions, and we need to face up to that. So we've already mentioned that, you know, commercial forestry, uniform forestry is not a good thing for our biodiversity. We have to balance it against forestry, food production, renewables, and we have to be honest when these things damage it. So RSPB did a study on Gordon Bush, a wind farm, a long time ago, saying that the golden plover population had decreased by 80%. They didn't object to Gordon Bush getting an extension. Now, I think that is an example of something that didn't need money. It just needed people to face up to the fact we have to look at these things. It was in the wrong place. Those golden plovers, that was the main place for them. And that wind farm should not have been built and certainly shouldn't have been extended. So that's an example. But land use strategy, I'm very keen on that, actually looking at all the inputs and saying, okay, we can use this area for this. But yes, we have to have more variety around the edges.
Thank you, Mark.
So as we've discussed already with forestry, with agriculture, you know, there is so much public money going into land, going into the environment. We've got to make sure that that is actually delivering for biodiversity. The first step, of course, is to set the targets. So Natural Environment Bill will set the targets. But as we've seen with climate change, targets only work if you've actually got robust action plans. And of course, we need the finance alongside that to make that work. So, you know, I'm proud of the role that Greens played in setting up the Nature Restoration Fund. Is it enough? Can it ever be enough? No, of course not. It needs far more investment, public and private investment, in order to deliver on those biodiversity targets. But I think it's important also that we look at conditionality. So, you know, if there is a wind farm development, if there's a housing development, how can we get improvements in biodiversity as a result of that? You know, house builders are building, you know, thousands of homes across Scotland right now. And one measure I put into Natural Environment Bill was to ensure that every home has at least one swift brick. That's a tiny little measure, 30 quid swift brick, but it will provide a home for birds. So we can do this on a very small scale, like with swift bricks. We can do it on a really big scale, like with offshore wind. So we can invest in restoration of our seas. But we have to get the finance right. It has to be ethical. And we have to make sure that the measures that are being invested in are not greenwash and they're actually genuinely going to allow restoration and compensation if there is environmental damage. And clearly there will be big questions about some of the offshore developments, particularly Berwick Bank. I don't think an agreement has been struck yet as to what a compensation measure actually looks like. We've got to get serious about restoration in our seas rather than just putting out some traps for rats on islands. You know, we need massive restoration, we need massive finance, but it needs to be done in a way which is cost
Thank you very
effective.
much.
Yeah, for me, I think biodiversity should be built into our planning process and be part of everything we build, whether, as Mark said, whether it's housing or whether it's factories or anything else, it should be built in. Also agree around leveraging private finance into this area, and that can either be through the Scottish National Investment Bank or the UK Investment Bank. And when I say that, I don't mean like the 40 million that we've seen to the Gresham House Investment Fund. It should be actually investment in to get much more private finance in. They will have to probably see a return for that, but there surely is ways of doing it.
Thank you. I'm going to return to online questions, and I'm going to take privilege of chair, because I can. I'm going to ask a slightly different question to give some space to public health. The World Health Organization has said climate change is the greatest threat to public health. These impacts are already being felt in Scotland, placing additional strain on the NHS. What will your party do to protect people and our NHS from this looming threat? And Gillian, I'd like to start with you.
I want us, well, all, to change the narrative around this, because I've heard from some of the panel members, they come and talking about the climate change plan has been a cost. They keep on talking about all the actions in the climate change plan has been too costly and been a waste of money, you know, and this is something that we do not talk about enough. There's studies out there, academic studies, that show the actual tangible cost of pollution to people's respiratory health, the cost of not having, indeed nature spend as well, the cost benefits, that's the phrase, we're going to have to come up with something better than cost benefits, because it's not really cutting through. Investing in nature and investing in climate action is actually preventative spend for health, particularly public health, and I'm including mental health in that. And there's enough data and studies out there for us to actually be able to quantify what a difference it will make in terms of health spend, particularly in preventative spend as well. But there's also, of course, the adaptation associated with climate action as well, which will make our communities more resilient. Again, talking not just about, you know, the health and the trauma associated with flooding, and things like we put money into peatland restoration, which is providing, you know, sponges up in the hills to stop the amount of water coming down in the winter. Which that's something that's actually going to traumatise communities as well, and can actually have a health risk. So there's so many studies out there. I don't think they get talked about enough in this, and I think that in this election, I do think that we really are going to have to fend off some of the people out there that are wanting to talk about climate change plans and climate action as being unnecessary, first of all, and also being a big cost to the public purse. It is actually going to save the public purse money.
Helen, if I could have yourself next.
Thanks. I'm glad Gillian mentioned mental health, because I'm very concerned that children and young people are, you know, they do have major mental health issues. And one of the things that bothers them is being told all the time about the climate crisis, and that, you know, they're really heading towards, there are people saying, oh, we're not going to have children because we're scared that, you know, their life will not be livable for them. And I think we have to, it's not a good way of doing communication. You know, I think you need to start looking at more positive ways of interacting on this issue. And with regards to public health, pollution obviously needs dealt with. Some of the issues that have, you know, actions been taken on, they're getting better results. Some of them they're not. They do have other impacts. If you take the low emission zone, something like 300 taxi drivers in Glasgow lost their jobs when the low emission zone was brought in. Was it worth it? Well, you need to look at it and see
My
what
apologies, just to bring it back to what will your party do to
yes.
protect people in our NHS from this threat?
Well, I'm saying you have to look at the facts, so I'm asking for the facts and something that has been done about it. Low emission zones, what are the facts on improved public health?
Can I just check, are you saying that the way to use the environment to prevent mental health problems is to stop children talking about the environment.
No, it's to get people out into nature. It's to help them enjoy nature, and it's help them to develop a healthy interaction with it. What I said was I'm looking for some evidence from Gillian about the effect of that.
Again, I want to respect the person that's asked the question, and I would like something succinct about what your party will do to protect people and our NHS from this threat. And I think Mark was next.
Well, okay, to come back to the question then, I mean, I know that one of the big costs on the NHS is, you know, conditions like COPD and asthma, and that is exacerbated by the poor air quality that we have in urban areas. So, you know, we need to reframe the conversation around climate. Many of the things that we need to do to tackle the climate crisis are just good for our health. And yes, they do save the NHS money, and they do help with people's quality of life. So, you know, active travel, instead of burning fossil fuels to get around, we burn calories. Improving our lung health, fantastic thing to do, saves the NHS money. And I think there is an important point around mental health, around improving our places and having safe places where we can get out and walk and cycle. This is all about living in vibrant, healthy communities. And, you know, I'd perhaps bring up one of the climate taboos here, which is diet. I mean, let's face it, many of us, probably myself included, are eating far too much red meat. And that is having an impact on the climate. So actually, if we start thinking about our lives through a health lens and thinking about how we can make it easier for people to make the choices which are great for health and well-being and strong communities, do you know what? By accident, we actually tackle the climate emergency as well.
So as I said it right at the beginning, you know, we want to get to net zero in a managed and affordable way, and we don't want to get there in a way that has a negative impact on our public finances. Because that will have a negative effect on our health. So I think we need to get there in a trajectory that's not going to be damaging to the public finances, and we will still have the health benefits as we go through that. There's a couple of things I want to pick up. You know, sometimes we talk about active travel and, you know, going on buses and everything else. Well, that's fine if you've actually got a bus service near you. You know, we've got to remember we've got rural communities as well that I represent, and they would actually just love to, you know, they don't talk about free bus travel, they just talk about having a bus. So we've got to make sure that we just don't look after people in the cities, we need to look after our rural communities as well.
Thank you, and Caitlin.
So again, I think I'm pretty much in agreement with, I would say, 75% of this panel, where I say that the NHS and the environment and health, it's not two different things, it's the same thing. The environment is health. I think that I wanted to specifically bring up a couple of issues. Firstly, I think housing, which is something that I'm very close to my heart. I think that the housing bill that went through quite recently, we put a number of amendments in talking about AWAB's law, which means that we would hold people to account to make sure that the inside of people's houses are free from damp and mould, and that's incredibly important. And I think that that's something that is intrinsically linked to the environment, and we'd want to make sure that that is pushed and made sure that that is kind of put in the next environment, in the next government. I think the other thing is, as you said, is active travel. I think that, I was just going to repeat exactly what you said, it would be quite nice if we had active travel that was travel at all, if we had bus services that were just bus services rather than, you know, they go into having really good bus services and good options for that.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. I'm going to take it from the audience, and I just saw one go up very sharply there. So you must be filled with enthusiasm. I will hand it to you there. Or you regret me making eye contact with you. Either way, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Caitlin from Young Sea Changers Scotland. The harsh reality is that the decisions that you make, either currently in government or when you come to government, will affect the kind of future that us young people are due to inherit. And right now we are feeling quite betrayed at seeing promises being broken and consultations being delayed and developments being approved that's impacting our environment currently. We don't want any more of this. We're scared and we're angry and we're tired. So my question is what kind of Scotland are you going to leave to us young people, and what actions will you take to ensure that young people actually have a voice in the developments moving forward?
I'm very glad I came to you. We'll start with yourself. We'll go in the middle, Douglas. We'll go with yourself first.
First thing I would like to see is actually more people involved in politics to have a voice. Often it's sort of old people in our parliament, so I think it'd be good to have more young voices there. And you know, I was I've been quite clear all along. I'm not from a party that says net stupid zero and anything like that. We want to get to net zero in a way that is manageable, doesn't actually cost jobs, doesn't even, because that's, I'm from the northeast of Scotland. A lot of people are actually scared where all the jobs are going to be, and so we need to make sure that's right. Because I think for me, the best thing we can offer young people is prosperity, is hope, is a good education, good jobs. That's, I think, the best thing that we can give to young people.
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure. I would say that I am not a young person just yet. I'm not willing to give up that dream. I would say, however, that one of the things that we would be really interested in doing is something that was very successful down in Wales, is a Future Generations Bill, so that we ourselves are held accountable to future generations and how we leave the environment better than the way that we found it. I think that's something I would be really, really keen to see in the next environment, because it's not just, or the next government, sorry, it's not just enough to say that we are really sorry for what's happened before and we want something to improve. I think we need to hold ourselves accountable, and we need to make sure that anything that we do that has an impact on the world that we're leaving to other people needs to actually take notice of that. And yeah, that's what I would do.
Thank you, Gillian.
I am going to do everything I can to decarbonise the systems in this country that are relying on burning fossil fuels, because that is the only way to make our country resilient, and indeed to create the jobs that you, young people, younger than you, are going to be going into. If we, and also another thing, I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder against the climate deniers who are making their way into politics. And young people need to stand up and align with people who understand that doing climate action is going to not just be good for the whole world, it is actually going to be our economic future in Scotland. It is not just our duty, it is our opportunity to create the jobs of the future, to decarbonise our systems so that we're less reliant on fossil fuels, because as long as we are reliant on fossil fuels, we are really in a bit of a quandary here. We need to make sure that transport is decarbonised as far as possible. We need to make sure that electricity is decarbonised as far as possible. We need to have fuel switching from heavy industry into low carbon sources of fuel as well. And we need to be making sure that we put money into nature restoration for all those health benefits that we've mentioned. And we must say to climate deniers, you are wrong, and we must say it loudly and not be afraid to say that.
Thank you. Helen.
Yeah, I sometimes think there's an urban-rural divide, which is even more important than other divides people point out in politics. And, if you live in a rural area and you're a young person and, there's not the buses, there's not the active travel or any other kind of travel to get them to a job that they can't get to because it's 30 miles away and there's no buses. So one thing that needs to be done is to make sure that young people can get to jobs, but also they need to have jobs. And there's been a lot of talk here about, how great things are going to be, and we're losing huge numbers of jobs in the northeast, which has been the powerhouse of Scotland in the oil and gas industry. And, most of the people here probably drove in a car. If they're well off, they drove in an electric car. If they're not, they didn't. It may not be less compliant. And so some of the decisions that are being made, to be virtue signalling are not helping young people who want to be able to get to a job. They want to be able to afford to get themselves a car if they need that. They want their education to be decent. You've had a very raw deal. The COVID years were grim, and it's gone on from there. There's people hybrid working. If you get a job, it's not necessarily the best way for people to start off in their careers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.
2019, there was the climate strikes, and there was all that kind of anger, but also hope as well that we can, make a different world. And I just feel that has gone, and we need to reignite that hope again, because there are amazing jobs that can come from action to restore nature, to restore the climate. My two sons are not interested in politics, which is fair enough. But I've got one son who's planting out 2,000 trees this week. I've got another son who's doing engineering at school and is thinking about his options for the future. So we've got to create these opportunities. And, too often we look at communities in Fife, for example, where you know, for generations now, they're living with the consequences of the closure of the coal mines, and there isn't the hope there. We need to create the hope. We need to create the opportunities for everybody to take action. You know, we need the policy discussions, so you're all welcome to come to Parliament and get involved with the conversations that we're having in chambers and committees and cross-party groups. But at the end of the day, we need doers. We need people planting thousands of trees. We need people restoring our seas as well, restoring our seagrass meadows and everything else that's needed in between. So that's where the hope has to come from.
Thank you very much. That is us in terms of questions we can take from the audience and online. Thank you to everybody who's participated. I've got one question to wrap up from the panel, and I'm asking for one sentence wrap up from yourselves. Just the themes that I have noticed from what is being said and from what was just asked in that question was the words lack of progress, stuck, slow pace have been said repeatedly, both in the answers you've given and from those in the audience. And having had the privilege of working with some of the organisations that are in this room, it's also how they're feeling with the way in which we are tackling the challenges for climate and nature. What one thing do you think needs to be changed to radically meet the pace that's required for the urgent challenge? And I'm particularly interested to hear from all of those who have had access to power to support making some of that change. Gillian, would you like to go first?
The biggest thing that's going to make the climate change plan work is the reduction in the cost of electricity. We get a reduction in the cost of electricity, there will no longer be resistance to renewable projects. We get a reduction in the cost of electricity, people will opt to have clean heating in their homes. With a reduction in electricity, there will be more electric buses, there will be more electric cars. People will end up making choices because they are the right choices for their cost of living priorities. That is the single biggest thing that can happen. Unfortunately, it is not happening quick enough. We've had success of UK governments to do it. We are an energy-rich nation. We are abundant in renewable energy. We need to see a reduction in the cost of electricity.
Thank you. Just repeating my request for one-sentence responses. Caitlin, yourself.
I would say we need to reduce the bureaucracy, we need to get rid of consultations, endless consultations, which are then a lot of the answers are ignored, and you just need to look at environmental impact assessments. It's just a nonsense. We need to deal with that.
Well, we need ambition, we need leadership, we need action from the next government. We've seen too many initiatives stall. We can't afford to stall them anymore. We need to deliver the benefits of climate and nature action now.
Thank you.
What I think we need is some honesty. We need honesty on what can and can't be done. We need some honesty about the price of electricity, because Gillian's right, electricity costs are too high. But we have had the SNP announce that electricity costs would reduce by a third under an independent country, but there's been no plans, no detail to back that up. So I think we need to see honesty, and when people say they're going to deliver a plan, then let's see it.
And finally, Caitlin, thank you.
I think we need a just transition that's real and not just a word that's bandied about, and it brings sustainable jobs. I think that we need to restore our natural environment and push towards that.
Thank you. Can you join me in thanking our panellists this evening? Thank you to the many hundreds that have joined us online. I finished on 146 questions. There was no way I was going to get through them, but I hope we have managed to get through as much as we can. A huge thank you to all of you in the room. What I will say is that the coalition that has put together this evening's work will be summarising the questions and will be sending them to parties to hopefully get some more of the answers, not just the ones that we had in this room. This is a critically important election for Scotland, so participation of not just who's in the room, but 5 people who perhaps don't want to engage in this or don't think that this is important also is our responsibility. So where you can, talk to people, engage them in this conversation, engage them in scrutinising their candidates with respect and rigour. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to be your chair this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.